Hi, my name is Joel Gallegos, and today we'll be discussing effective listening and its different stages and different types of techniques in regards to having a conversation with someone. First of all, we're going to talk about the initial stages. Basically, when you start off a conversation, the first step in listening is going to be receiving what the person is actually saying. And in regards to that, basically listening is it's not something that just happens. It's actually you have to take the initiative to actually be proactive in listening to maintain basically a decent conversation. And what I mean by that is, focus on the person, on what they're saying, body movements and so forth. Just being really proactive in your listening skills, showing attention so the person that's actually speaking to you knows that you're actually interested in what they're saying. That basically goes over the first initial step in regards to starting the listening stages and process. Second would be understanding. Understand what the person is saying. You could sit there and listen to a person and not really comprehend what the point that they're trying to get across. So the next one would definitely be understanding. Really focus on what the person is saying. Kind of compute the information. Really repeat it in your head if you need to. But that would be the next proactive step. Just to show once again to the speaker that you're actually listening to what they're saying. Third step basically is remembering. Anytime you're in a conversation, obviously you're expected to respond. So the next step would obviously be to remember the information. And what I mean by that basically is definitely compute what the person is the point that they're trying to get across to you and what they're actually saying to you, so you can come back with a proactive response and an intelligent response. For one, to keep the conversation going on a decent guideline and so forth. So that would be the next step. Next step after that would be evaluating. That kind of goes into what I was speaking about before. You basically want to evaluate what the person is saying. Really think about it. Repeat it to yourself once in your mind if you need to, or also repeat it out loud if you need to, just to get confirmation from the speaker that you understand what the point he's trying to get across, or the statement that they're trying to get across is correct, that you're actually understanding it correctly, and you're evaluating the information so you can give a decent response. At that point in time, obviously a response would be due, so the last step would be responding. And when you do respond, you want to respond intelligently. Make sure you stay focused on the subject at hand. Try not to go off the subject matter, to basically keep the conversation intact. From there, basically what you would do at that point in time is we're going to go into different guidelines for effective listening. In regards to listening, that's going to be the most important factor of any conversation. Listening alone basically will determine whether or not the conversation remains educational. Anything. It's just one of the most important factors. It actually is the most important factor. Without it, a conversation ain't going to continue. You can have a person speak nonstop about anything, but if there's no response, no intelligent response to keep the conversation going, that conversation is pretty much going to be dead. So here are some guidelines for effective listening, some tips on how to actually, improve the way you actually listen. I'm going to give some personal experiences that I've actually had. I actually first got involved in sales, and listening was probably the biggest reason to my success. That's basically what I kind of focused on in regards to any sales presentation, as were the majority of people out there actually focus on their sales presentation and actually doing the majority of the talking. I was number one in my company for 9 years, a wireless carrier, and I did it basically by keeping my mouth shut and speaking when it was necessary. I let the customer do the majority of the talking. What it does is it gains interest. It just makes the person speaking as if they have a purpose, and it actually makes it really personal when they understand that you're sitting there and you're actually listening to them, and you're taking into account, you're actually feeling what they're saying, which kind of goes into the guidelines and the tips that I'm going to give you now. First one would be listen actively. When you're there, don't stare at something in the broad there. Just keep the attention on the person's face. Focus completely on what they're saying. Give some reactions, some nonverbal reactions when they are speaking, so they understand that you are listening, you are understanding. That's going to be one of the biggest tips. It'll keep the conversation going, and it basically gains the speaker's trust, because it actually shows that you're really listening to what they're saying. Next tip that I'd probably give a person would be to listen for total meaning. In regards to that, like I said before, you really want to feel what the person is saying. You really want to understand what the point that they're trying to get across. Listen to their total meaning. I mean, a person could basically sound like they're not irritated, that they're not upset, but their nonverbal language is speaking something completely different. So you have to focus on all the factors that are involved when you're actually listening. So that's basically that. The next one would be listen with empathy. When you listen with empathy, is basically you're walking in the person's shoes. You completely understand what they're saying. Anytime you do this, when a person is kind of venting to you, it's what I used to do, and it would always work well because it'd make the conversation very personal, is I would almost come back with my own experience that related really closely to that, to what they were saying, so they actually truly understood that you truly felt their emotions and what the point that they're trying to get across. So that would be the next step, and that's a very important step because that will make that conversation very personal. And if you're in a sales structured environment, I mean 9 times out of 10, if you can win a person's trust, they will pretty much buy anything from you at that point. I mean, you could be selling vacuums, I mean, you could be selling balls of yarn, and I'm telling you, a person will buy any product from you once you get on that personal level. So the listening with empathy is actually a very important part of this process. Finally, last would probably be, well, not last, but next to last would be listen with an open mind. You don't want to put any personal bias into the conversation, any personal judgments, anything like that. You want to keep the conversation really professional. Once you start doing that, once you start putting your personal bias into the conversation, emotions are going to get involved. Doesn't keep the conversation professional. People get upset and so forth. I mean, you really have to keep an open mind, especially when you're dealing with different types of people, cultures. If you're in a sales environment, that's where you're going to see it the most. I mean, you're going to have 1,000,001 personalities approaching you, and you got to learn how to adjust and change your mind state from one person to the next. I mean, you'll run into conservative people that want to discuss issues about different topics. You'll run into very outlandish people that are just extreme. I mean, you have to learn how to adjust your mind, your personality, and really listen with an open mind and respond in that same manner as well. You don't want to respond to a certain personality with the response that you would respond to somebody that's completely opposite. I mean, you really have to focus on the energy that's given to you so you could respond with the same amount of energy and be on the same wavelength in a sense. Last would be listen ethically. I mean, when you're listening, like, you don't want to put any personal bias into the conversation, just like we were talking about before. Give the speaker, an honest chance, a fair chance. Really try and put yourself in their shoes, and that's what it all really comes down to. Just don't put any personal bias into it. I mean, a conversation is about having an opinion. It's not about judgments. I mean, it's just an opinion is all it is. You really don't want to get involved in any emotional debate or anything like that. You just want to keep the conversation professional, strictly to the point, so it can be concluded in a decent manner and resolved. If it's a problem, get resolved. Obviously, that's the best way to take care of it. So overall, like I said, just the overall tips and guidelines that I've given you, I basically reflected them into my personal experience and overall everything that I've done. The biggest impact that it had on me was when I was in retail. That's when I actually noticed the huge impact that it did have on my personal success, and that's what kind of separated me from the rest, is the fact that I wasn't there to be a used car salesman and talk. I was actually there to listen, solve problems, gain the trust of my employees, from my customers, to make sure that people came back to me or to my store because they knew that we were capable of getting it done and understanding what they were saying, and we were really good problem solvers. And that basically just comes to account that we had great listening skills. And so I'm going to leave it on that note, stress the importance of how well listening will affect your career or whatever you decide to do in your life, but it definitely will separate you from the rest. So thanks again. My name is Joel Gallegos, and if you have any feedback, please feel free to shoot me an email. Thanks.